From Chicago's Can TV, a look at the week's events is reported in the newspapers, in the blogs and online, and on radio and TV. This is Chicago Newsroom.
Well, hi again. Welcome back to the show. And before we start, a round of thanks to our good old friends Charlie Meyerson and Natalie Moore. They took over this chair for the past couple of weeks while I was enjoying some time away, and I really want to thank them for doing a great job. So, it's been another really good week for Squeezy the Pension Python, huh? Another week, another $17 million a day in unfunded pension liabilities. But hey, as we say in Illinois, my state rep and my state senator went to a special session in Springfield, and all I got was this lousy conference committee. A committee that they say may finally come up with a compromise solution in a few weeks, or maybe longer, or maybe never. So you're going to really want to keep your eye on that development in the news, I'm sure. On today's show, though, it's going to be all things transportation. The Red Line reconstruction and possible expansion, Mayor Emanuel's drive for more and more bike lanes, the vaunted Ventra Card, traffic, red lights, speeding cameras, more planes over your house at night. These are all things that Jon Hilkevitch deals with every day in his beat as transportation writer at the Chicago Tribune, and I'm so glad to have you on the show here again, Jon, because we're just going to spend the whole half hour, and we're not even going to get close to touching on everything, I'm sure.
Well, great to be with you, Ken.
So glad to have you here. So why not start with the Red Line, because the Red Line is kind of the elephant in the room at this point as far as big transportation stories are concerned. The impression I have is that there was a lot of brouhaha about, oh, how awful this was going to be for everybody, and it kind of, tell me if I'm wrong, but it seems like it's kind of quieted down. Has the CTA gotten it right? Did they actually do it right?
Well, 1 month into a 5-month project, things are going very well. This was a project that the CTA and the mayor's office was just dedicated to not letting fail. CTA is throwing about $11 million in temporary new service along the closed Red Line in the form of shuttle buses, added Red Line trains on the Green Line tracks, because they just did not want the hue and cry from the South Side community that they're not getting equal treatment to the North Side. You know, they did the Brown Line project some years ago, completely different type of project. That was stations. Yeah. The South Branch of the Red Line is track replacement. Right. So the decision was made that unlike the Brown Line, where they kept service running, they're shutting down the Red Line South from Cermak Chinatown all the way to 95th Street, 9 stations, till about October 19th. And at that time, Forrest Claypool, CTA president, says riders will have a brand new railroad. Everything from the drainage on up to the track bed, the track, the signals, third rail will be completely modernized. And it will cut down that trip at least 10 minutes each way, 20-minute round trip.
And you've actually been out to the construction site, something of which I must say I'm intensely jealous, but because I just think that would be really cool to be able to go out there and report on that. But that is exactly what they're doing, right? They're just scraping it right down to the dirt and starting over.
Yeah, as we speak, about 80% of the old track has been removed, as well as third rail and other things. And then they're going to start rebuilding it, starting from 95th Street, working north, and then at some point about 18th Street, working south, they'll meet up. There is some pain. There is no Red Line, but they have put so much alternate service out there in terms of shuttle buses, express and local shuttle buses, 24/7. Discounts on some of the South Side bus routes, free shuttles over to Garfield on the Green Line, and then you board the Green Line at Garfield for free over the 5 months. I mean, people are...
And they'll send a car to your house to take you to the shuttle bus if you
Yeah.
Well, it's really, one of the things that strikes me about this is that it might be really painful to stop the temporary service.
Some people have said to me, tongue-in-cheek, that, hey, let's keep this, because they're just amazed at how quick these trips from the various closed Red Line stations are taking on the Dan Ryan to their destinations. It really... So it has worked.
And they upgraded the Green Line tracks to accommodate this beforehand, right? So
That's
they
right.
could put more So anyway, well, I can tell you that if anybody who lives along the Dan Ryan wants to complain too much about it, I can bring together a bunch of people from Jefferson Park who can talk about what we went through for a couple of years when they decided, for whatever reason, they had to replace they didn't build a new railroad per se, but they replaced all the tracks from pretty much O'Hare all the way in, right, all the way through the subway.
Right.
And that was done at night and weekends, and it was miserable.
Yeah, and there will be more in store for those folks, because closer to downtown, there still are slow zones where they didn't do that original work that you referred to.
Yeah.
So that's the problem with the system that's over 100 years old.
Right.
I mean, maintaining it is just a daily battle, and if you don't keep at it, there's slippage, and before you know it, things are really
And
mucked
there
up.
certainly were, like the Illinois pensions, there were definitely periods when all that money was going into operations and not into maintenance, and there were many years when maintenance was deferred way beyond where it should have been, and we're paying that price today, I guess, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, CTA has $7 billion in unmet capital needs. They could pay for about $3 billion for the total price tag of $10 billion, but just a huge amount of work. And if you look at the situation the state's in, as well as federal funding, it's not a pretty picture at all, Ken.
Yeah, and of course they're also attempting to do kind of a similar job on the north end of the red line, because it's a different kind of need, I suppose, but I mean it's just as critical in a way. I mean the oldest stations in the system, decrepit, awful stations, and that embankment that was built in the 1880s or something.
You're right.
I mean that's all crumbling.
Yeah, the CTA has basically spent $86 million recently on a Band-Aid to take the worst of the worst 7 Northside stations, starting at Jarvis and working south. And they painted them, they fixed the leaky roofs. They made other sort of life safety changes that will allow them to keep these stations open at least for a number of more years until they get the money for a complete rebuild, to tear those stations down. CTA and the city appear to be very optimistic that this is going to happen, though, because just this week they announced that they're installing artwork in these 7 stations. They said
that just means that they're not going to be doing anything for a long time. So we're just going to let's throw the artwork up now. We got the money for that.
Unfortunately, that money comes from a different federal transit pot. They can't use it for anything else. And they are going to start a competition for artwork on the 9 stations on the south branch of the Red Line. So, I prefer they attack slow zones, but again, it's different amounts and pots of money.
Pockets, different money. And of course, there's always been that discussion, I know we've had this before, about the sort of the overarching comprehensive solution about how you integrate the Evanston line, the Purple line, and all that into the Red Line, and it's just so piecemeal. It's been put together over the last 40 or 50 years, and there's no comprehensive solution to it, and that would be something else that hopefully sometime down the road. I mean, that line should run from Linden to 130th Street with no interruption, but that's...
Well, they're at the very beginning. They have a program called RPM, Red Purple Modernization, and they're sort of laying out ideas. This is a program that could cost anywhere from $2 billion to $4 billion, just staggering amounts of money to replace the stations, rebuild the lines, maybe allow for express tracks, as you suggest. It's in its infancy. There's a lot of opposition when they talk about station closings, because that's been a topic. Do we close South Boulevard, for example, in Evanston, or we consolidate Jarvis with Morris and things like that? The people who use those stations obviously don't like that. But this will be eventually a complete rebuild from north of Belmont all the way through Evanston. So,
and what about this? What about this extension to 130th Street? Our distinguished mayor ran on that was one of his platforms. He's going to get that thing extended to 130th Street.
Right.
Do you really think it'll happen in either of our lifetimes?
Well, you're right about what Emmanuel said. He said actually within 2 years of his election, he would start construction, and that certainly isn't going to happen. It's a project that's going to cost at least $1.5 billion to extend from 95th Street to 130th Street, build 4 new stations. CTA is putting feelers out for a P3, public-private partnership. They say they have received interest in that. They hired a financial team headed by Goldman Sachs, and they're looking for investment to design, to build this extension and to maintain it. So it would still be a CTA line. It would not be privatized in terms of the line itself, but clearly they're hoping to rely on private investment to make this happen.
So they're not going to sell it to Laz Parking or anything?
Oh God, we hope not. But again, so the upside is that P3s are the new rage. But the big question mark is there interest in investing in this? Is there what is the risk for the private investment community versus the return?
Before we leave the CTA, I've wanted to ask you this for some time. Give me an assessment of where you think the CTA is today as opposed to, say, 5 years ago, 10 years ago, 20 years ago, in terms of its political viability, its cachet kind of thing. I mean, what I'm getting at is, you always got the impression that Rich Daley knew there was a subway system and an L car system of some kind. He'd never ridden on it, but he thought it was important, and he did what he could to keep it going. But Rahm Emanuel got elected by the CTA. I mean, doesn't he claim that he's been to every CTA stop in the city or something when he was running for office? Right. And he put one of his most trusted people, Forrest Claypool, in charge of the operation. And between them, it seems to me that they've been able to squeeze a lot of money out of Washington where there doesn't seem to be any money. I mean, you have to inject reality into this as I go along. But they're buying 800 new L cars. They're getting a lot of money for line reconstruction and that kind of thing. It seems to me that there's more of a commitment to the CTA today politically than there's been in decades.
Well, I agree partly, but also, Emanuel likes to take credit for things that the ball started rolling well before him.
Don't we know that?
And there's a lot of that going on in terms of purchases of new buses. The CTA is renewing its fleet of more than 1,800 buses. You mentioned the new rail cars, the 5,000 series. CTA recently announced that they're going to go after an additional 800 cars over the next 10 years. So, there is that going on, and they have been able to get more money from the federal government, although that part has shrunk. But a lot of this, I think, has to also do with just the state capital improvement program, Illinois Jobs. A lot of that program is pretty much expired. It's out of money. And a lot of the money that the CTA has received came through that. So I don't know, Emanuel cannot take credit for that, though that was in the pipeline.
Okay, so so the next couple of years will really tell the picture of what kind of political clout he and Claypool and the guys have.
I mean, especially with Washington, because we have a 2-year federal transportation bill instead of a 6-year bill, which is the average.
I see.
It's going to run out in September of 2014. It's a very small amount for the whole country compared to what the Obama administration and the Democrats that previously controlled the House of Representatives wanted. So in this era of sequestration and debt, it's really a big question as to whether or not Congress is going to do something or punt.
I mean, if we have an 8 to 10 billion unmet need for infrastructure improvement, I can't imagine what would be like if you start adding in New York and Boston and Philadelphia and all the other older cities like us that have all been deferring maintenance for decades. It's mind-boggling.
So it's just a question, where is this future pot of money going to come from? I mean, the Obama administration has pretty much ruled out increasing the gas tax for uses both on roads and transit. And the need isn't going to go away. I mean, we're the second or third most congested region in the entire country. None of us could imagine the Chicago area without CTA, without Metro, or even PACE. And the congestion that would result is staggering. So you got to take the blinders off, and some tough decisions do have to be made both locally and nationally.
This raises another issue for me that, again, it's just something that, just an observation, but I kind of get the impression that Metro is in trouble, that it's like, it's always been sort of the prince of transportation. It's, we both kind of came up, I think, in the 60s and 70s, and when Metro was created, it was born with a platinum spoon in its mouth. The suburbs loved it, so it got lots of money. And now it doesn't feel that way. It seems like they're having many more problems with equipment and time schedules, and their infrastructure is aging, and they've had management problems. Am I off balance on that?
No, not at all. You know, their on-time performance, as you alluded to, you could set your watch by it.
Yeah.
When the trains
We're
are
on
running.
time,
Yeah.
are you?
Yeah, and unfortunately that's not the case anymore. It has slipped quite a bit. Metra has played around with what is on time, you know, so that they've boosted
like
their scores, like
something.
the airlines, yeah. But you know, you can't count on it as much. I ride the Burlington Northern Line in every day, so I experience the delays there, you know, almost every day. Equipment failures, it's a problem. Metra is acquiring new locomotives, they're having new rail cars built. But you know, this is a system that you know, the RTA system inherited from the freight railroads back in the 70s when they said we don't want to do passenger rail anymore. And
so that's why
tough.
we still have freight train interference on,
Exactly.
on the traffic reports every day. So.
And then politically, you know, Alex Clifford, the Metra CEO, is embattled. There are members of the board that want him out.
And he's relatively new.
Yeah, he comes from California, no commuter rail background. He worked bus systems there and was a city councilman. But there's a lot of folks that don't like his management style. He made some decisions early on, such as with the Inglewood flyover on the south side, not to rebid that, despite protests from Danny Davis and other black congressmen that this project didn't provide enough contracts and jobs to minority firms. So he sort of held his ground, but I don't think he you know, has an understanding of how Illinois works, and he's made a lot of enemies.
Yeah. And it is interesting. I didn't realize it until I read it in your writing that he's not even a train guy. He's a bus guy. It's kind of an odd pick, you would think, because then he had to go out and hire a train guy at a lot of money to come in and help him run the railroad.
Well, that's the first thing he did, was to bring in a consultant when he first came on board, and ended up paying this consultant twice Clifford's salary. So, you know, the board started questioning right from the get-go. You know, well, we hired you. If you can't do the job, you know, we have issues.
So we're essentially paying 3 salaries then, if we're paying you 1 and him, this other guy, twice yours.
Right, and Metra was asleep at the switch in not raising fares over the years by small amounts to increase revenue. And Clifford came in, you know, like a bulldozer, and put in back-to-back fare increases. You know, most recently with the 10-ride pass. So that's been very unpopular with riders.
And they of course had to get over the whole Phil Pagano thing of their former CEO who committed suicide and was found to be, what would we say, extorting money, I guess, or?
Yeah, I mean, he basically was stealing money from Metra, that he was counting it as future vacation time and things like that. But
all right. Well, anyway, all right. So CTA, we got Metra, but before we leave CTA, we have to talk about Ventra. Now, the Ventra Card, you have written extensively about this, and you've just been one hell of a troublemaker, I guess, when it comes to the people who are trying to initiate the Ventra Card system. Once again, it was a red-hot story for a while. Now it seems like it's less so, and it appears it's because the CTA has just kind of, perhaps wisely, backed off on some of these apparently really bad ideas they had.
They did. There's 2 parts of the Ventra Card. There's the Ventra Transit account.
We should say what it is.
Okay. Ventra Card is going to be a new transit card appearing sometime this summer. Originally, Forrest Claypool said it would be summer. Now it's late summer, so we don't even know what the schedule is. But it's going to replace the Chicago Card and the Chicago Card Plus, and really get the CTA completely out of the banking business of issuing passes and things. This is all going to be taken over by private companies that are going to operate this, and the CTA could focus on its core mission, which is running the trains and buses. So
a good idea?
That is an excellent idea. Yeah.
Okay. And that part you're.
So yeah. So the transit side of the card, I think, is a good idea. People are starting to have problems with their Chicago cards. You know, it has a computer chip in there. It's a number of years old. It's starting to fail.
Yeah.
So they need to move to the next generation.
That problem too. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So the next generation will be a radio frequency card, and you know, that's that's what's going to be around for some years to come. And there are very minimal fees associated with the transit side of the card. CTA initially said you would pay $5 to receive the Ventra Card, and then if you registered it, they would put $5 of travel on your account, so it would be basically free after that. Now they're saying that they will issue the Ventra Card free starting this summer at various festivals and city events to just.
So they're just going to be handing them out.
Yeah, that's
Wow.
what they're saying now. The controversial side of Ventra is the Ventra prepaid debit MasterCard. You don't have to open a debit card account. You could just go with the Ventra Transit Card if you wish. But CTA and its financial partners have been essentially pitchmen for this prepaid debit card. Which, if you look at the history of prepaid debit cards, I mean, these are really not a good deal for consumers. They're just loaded with charges, and the CTA Ventra prepaid debit card was no different. Tribune did a study with one of the leading credit card rating firms, and it turns out that if you did take this prepaid debit card, you'd rack up something like $188 a year in fees for using ATMs, for getting a paper statement if you wanted. If you had a discrepancy and you called them up, they charge you $10 an hour research fee.
Unbelievable.
So yeah, it was a racket. And meanwhile, the CTA was pitching this as that this was good, especially for low-income individuals who are currently hostage to currency exchanges, which also have a lot of service charges and user fees. But many people feel that CTA had no business getting into the debit card business. No other transit agency in the U.S. is doing that. They are moving to a Ventra-like transit card. But to put the CTA name out there and tie it to this commercial product that is really very questionable.
And that idea, as I understand it, that had been around for a while too. I mean, that even predates Claypool's or Rahm Emanuel's administration, right? I mean, there was Daley people who kind of put that idea together originally.
Yeah.
So I mean, it's been around. What I'm trying to get at is there have been many opportunities to go in there and look at this and say, maybe we don't want to go down this road.
Right.
And it sounds like they've kind of gone halfway down that road.
Well, they've certainly backtracked. They've dropped the most odious of the service fees. So you still have to be very careful with a card. They're saying, now you can use the Ventra prepaid debit card and go to an ATM, but it has to be a ATM within this very limited network. Otherwise, you will pay
those fees. You're going to be paying $1.50 just to get money.
If you were to reload the Ventra debit card with cash, there's fees of up to $4.95 per transaction associated with that. So that's how you rack up these charges.
So don't you kind of get the impression that people are going to do what certainly I will do, which is just use the Ventra as a replacement for your Chicago card and just not ever open the debit card side of it?
I would guess that with all the attention that has been paid to the debit card side, that people will either, as you say, go with a Ventra Transit, but they also can simply start using their personal credit card. They could pay their fares on rail and bus using that. So there really isn't any reason to go with Ventra at all.
If you want to just do it straight onto your credit card.
Right.
Yeah. Okay. That's also very interesting. Wow. Once again, we've been dawdling, John. We've not gotten to. We haven't talked about red light cameras. We haven't talked about bicycles. We need to talk about the O'Hare runway. Could we just do that real quickly, because I think that's going to affect a lot of people very directly. It's what is it called? 10 Center.
10 Center.
This is the runway that
Center.
Paved over the cemetery.
St. Johanna Cemetery, correct.
So it's done. It's opening.
It's almost done. It'll be opening in the middle of October. This will only be the second new runway under O'Hare Modernization that's opened since ground was broken in 2005. This is a many billion-dollar project that was actually supposed to be completely wrapped up at the end of 2012. Right now, as I said, there's only one new runway opened, a second set to open October. And if you look at the latest DOT delay and cancellation reports for O'Hare, on-time performance at O'Hare has completely tanked this year. We're in dead last place for arrivals and delays. So clearly what Mayor Daley had called this bad weather runway was going to get things right. That hasn't helped at all. The second runway should help, and then there's another runway coming online in 2015. But as far as completion of the entire project, the city and the airlines agreed to disagree on what to do.
Where the money's going to come from.
Right, and the airlines say this is completely demand-driven, that they feel that the next 2 runways coming online will make them good to go for many years, and they don't even want to talk about more runways.
It is interesting that, I mean, again, this gets really geeky, but O'Hare was always a kind of a crosshatch of, because it was a military thing, right? So it had runways in all directions. But modern airports built for, you know, the modern age, all have parallel runways.
They do.
So in order to make O'Hare a parallel airport, they had to crack a lot of eggs, didn't they? They had to,
yes.
They had to pretty much destroy Elk Grove Village and a couple of other places in the process. But it is interesting to see how it's been for the last year or so, for the first time, that you'll see 2 planes coming in from the east right next to each other, almost like wing to wing, landing at the same time, which you didn't ever see before this because of the parallel runways. But what that means, briefly, is that a lot of people are going to have a lot more planes coming over their houses if they live in Chicago.
Right, and that's the rub, that a lot of Chicagoans didn't understand this. They heard and read about it, all the attention, as you said, in Elk Grove Village, where land was acquired at Bensonville. Parts of Bensonville were decimated for the far southern runway. But city residents in Sauganash and Hegwich and other communities on the north and northwest side thought they were, you know, good to go. They didn't have any worries. Now they're seeing that there's much more jet noise, and it's only going to get worse starting in October, because that's
what am I laughing at? I'm one of those
You're
people.
one of those.
Yeah,
okay.
yeah, this is not funny.
Because come October, O'Hare will really switch to an east-west configuration, because eventually they're going to have 6 east-west runways, and you're going to have traffic, you know, almost constant during some times of the day.
I've already got it so that I can practically see the faces of people in the windows as the planes come over my house. So,
pun intended, it has been a rude awakening.
Yes, and
you know,
later hours too.
And later hours.
Yeah.
So folks are, you know, contacting their aldermen and representatives, and they think there's something they could do about this. But you know, the horse has left the barn.
It's over. The runway's built.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah. Can we just real quickly jump to bicycles? We've got like a couple of minutes left here. Again, a Rahm Emanuel thing, right? Well, Daley was also very big on bikes, but Rahm Emanuel has taken it into overdrive, no pun intended, with Dearborn Street and all that. What's your take on that? What's going on?
Well, I think we need to increase the mode, especially for commuters who are going by bicycle. Right now, it's under 1%. Can the city get it up to 5? I don't know. But I think Rahm's idea of protected bike lanes is a good thing. It gives people a sense of security that they can take their bikes on city streets. It also has a traffic calming effect on cars. We have a terrible problem not only with speeding, but the accidents that result in that. Number of pedestrians hit by vehicles is at epidemic proportions in the city. Hit and runs, we lead the entire nation. So
that's amazing.
Yeah, so we really have to do something there. Dearborn Street is a very complicated experiment. It's the city's first time where you have a 2-way bike lane on the west side of Dearborn Street. It took away 1 traffic lane. You have a parking lane that buffers that 2-way bike lane, and then you have the rest of traffic.
And they have signals too.
And it has bike-only signals.
Bike-only signals, yeah.
Which you know, is a curious thing. I mean, why do bicyclists need their own traffic signal? Why can't they obey the regular red and green?
But you point out though that seems to have had some effect. It's like
the city is claiming now that with these bicycle signals, 8 out of 10 cyclists are now stopping for red lights. That's 161% improvement over
it would
before.
have to be at least that, I would think. Yeah,
but the converse of that is that if 2 out of 10 are still running red lights, what if you know? Can you imagine 2 out of 10 vehicles?
Yeah. Oh, absolutely.
On Dearborn,
right. Yeah.
I mean, it would be.
Well, John, I'm sorry to say we've just, as usual, crashed out of time here, but we'll do it again sometime, okay?
Okay,
I really appreciate it. Thanks for the update. Jon Hilkevitch works for the Chicago Tribune, the august Chicago Tribune, where he writes about transportation. And we're really glad you've been with us today. And we're glad you've been with us today because you've been watching Chicago Newsroom as always. It's a community service of CAN TV. You can watch us any old time. But if you want to see it on your own, you know, on your own schedule, check this address right now. You can watch it anytime online. And you can also subscribe to us on iTunes. We will talk to you again next week. I'm Ken Davis. Thanks for watching Chicago Newsroom. See you soon.